Fantastic. It was good to see you, Nick. Long time no see. There's always been a common denominator in terms of doing the right thing between you and I, albeit, healthy degree of difference of view, which is frankly where the money is as well. So great to see you. I thought it would be really helpful to talk about Starmer's first 30 days or however many days. It almost seems like a lifetime. It's just
It does, doesn't it?
um, and interesting enough, when I was making a couple of notes, I noticed that WTF was actually part of the spell checker. It doesn't get spell checked, and I think there's an element of struggling to find the right words to describe the current situation. But I think it'd be helpful to understand between you and I what's happening, what potential solutions are you are they, and also as a sort of brief introduction, Nick, I'd just be interested to understand just one or two sentences why you're interested in these subjects. You're clearly very passionate about a lot of things, which I think is fantastic. And actually, where does your past experience, sort of slot into this, and where, in terms of just very briefly. Then I thought if we just sort of hand the ball to you to talk about, a monologue without interruption. I'll do my best not to interrupt, and then I'll respond with some thoughts. Then maybe we'll compare notes at the end. And I think probably there's an element of actually what do we put our hope in to actually resolve this situation. I think maybe we'll sort of have a discussion like that. So, just in a couple of sentences, Nick, why do you care about what's going on, and how does it fit in with your background?
I care for several reasons. First reason is I'm English. This
Yeah,
is my country.
yeah,
If England fails, where do the English go?
yeah.
Many people who live in this country have got a second home.
Mm,
So people can go back to Ireland, can go back to Poland, can go back to Nigeria, can
mm,
go back to Pakistan. Even if they were born here, they've still got family roots, connection, and see that as the homeland.
mm,
I'm English. This is my home. If this burns down,
mm,
where do I go? That's the first reason.
mm. Yeah,
The real reason is I've seen firsthand from personal experience growing up to the work I've done for the council and for charities. I've seen the results for poor policy, poor planning, poor politicians, and a aim to implement ideology.
yeah.
And I've seen that all my life. I was brought up on a failing council estate in South Manchester, single mum, lived in poverty,
Mm,
very, very loving family, had no problems whatsoever growing
right.
up. I don't want any sympathy. I came from a lovely household.
You're clearly
But,
not a victim, Nick, are you?
no, but we had no money. But compared to the rest of the world, I was
Yeah,
very rich.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's about how you judge your situations.
Yeah.
Um, and I then I wasted I wasted the most productive part of my life where I should have been building and creating Nick Buckley into a formidable man for the future. And I wasted my teens and my 20s
Yeah,
because I was waiting for someone to knock on my door and give me opportunities and
yeah,
give me what I thought I deserved.
yeah.
And guess what, Tom? No one ever knocked on my door.
True.
No one
Yeah,
ever knocked on my door and gave me what I deserved.
yeah.
And then I hit 30 and thought, well, this isn't working out. This is it. I need to change. And I changed in my very early 30s, and everything started getting better immediately because I rejected the state, I rejected everybody else, and I
Mm.
depended on personal responsibility. I mean, this is literally now within months, everything started getting better. I
Yeah,
had
yeah.
more
I think
money.
that's absolutely vital, Nick. I mean, I think one thing that's absolutely certain is everybody has a choice between victimhood and blaming others and expecting the world to serve you
Hmm,
versus exactly what you just described, which is personal responsibility. So brilliant, yeah.
exactly. But then let's jump forward then to my career that I then fell into and then excelled at.
Yeah.
So I've worked on the streets with homeless people.
Mm,
I've worked with kids involved in gangs. I've
mm,
stopped girls being raped and abused.
mm,
And all those problems, a large part of those problems were created by politicians, poor policies, no backbone, no putting people first, no promoting personal responsibility, not allowing people to develop and do what they want to do, forcing people into what we want them to do. A good example is our state education.
mm.
One size fits all.
Yeah.
Our state education is great if you're academic and want to go to university. You'll probably excel in our state education. But if you don't fit that small narrow bandwidth there, then you'll hate school. 18% of all pupils in schools in England and Wales, that's almost 1 in 5, fail school if you base it on what the government says is a successful pupil, because we're forcing them to do things they don't want to do. You go to school for 11 years, you're not academic. You're being told every day, why can't you be more like Jimmy? Why can't you be more like Margaret? Are you stupid? Sit down, be quiet, stop causing problems, stop running around. And you have 18 years of that. No wonder you switch off. No wonder you become resentful. No wonder you become violent, because you've been tortured for 11 years because there's no option apart from state education. And I've seen what that results in. I've spoken to people living on the streets and dying on the streets. And there's many opportunities where we could have saved them. And I don't mean save them from dying on the street. It's all too late then. I'm talking about 30 years earlier, about how the state interfered in their lives so much and made them feel useless, pointless. And there's a phrase I've picked up called learned helplessness.
Yeah.
And that's when the state does so much for you in your life.
Yeah.
You end up not being able to solve any problems yourself or do anything for yourself.
Yeah.
So when there's ever an issue, you collapse and fall because you don't know how to solve an issue. And I'm not about problems. I'm talking about a bill comes through the door, and that is so distressful. You don't even open it.
Yeah.
So then 18 months later, you're now in court, where if you'd have been given the self-respect and the self-confidence and the skills just to open that letter and to then maybe ask for help with that letter, you wouldn't have got in the situation you're in. But that's what our government have been doing over nearly all my life. We've had socialist governments nearly all my life.
Yeah.
And I'm sick of it. And I'm sick of the be kind, pink and fluffy, cuddly, be compassionate. And what we're doing is we're killing people. We're grinding them down. And I've just had enough now.
Yeah. I think the combination of victimhood, not taking personal responsibility, plus safety is or this notion of safety. And interesting enough, safety actually has exactly the opposite. It actually covers things up quite dramatically. So that's brilliant. Thanks, Nick. So
let me give you an example what I tell people when we talk about safety.
Yeah. Okay.
So if you're a sheep living on a farm, you love that farmer. He looks after you.
Yeah.
He makes sure you're safe. He keeps the wolves away. He feeds you. When you get sick, he pays for his own money for a vet to come and examine you. He's like a godlike status. The whole flock of sheep love him because they think he's there to protect them. They just don't know his agenda until the day he turns up with a butchering knife and a stun gun.
Yeah.
So people who we think are protecting us usually aren't. We just don't know their agenda.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, every tyrant has always talked about safety. And interesting enough, they've always used a girl with pigtails as part of, Mao and Hitler always had a mascot of a girl with pigtails, which was odd. So brilliant. So let's just shoot forwards to Mr. Starmer. How long has he been in power now? It seems like a lifetime. When was it? When was election?
6 weeks, going on 7 weeks.
Wow.
6 weeks.
So let's just talk about that, Nick. I'm really interested to understand, what do you think is happening? I mean, you've touched on some of the background, which I think is really helpful. But what for me, there's the manifestation exactly of what you just described is unraveling and accelerating at quite a frightening rate. So what's your view of what's happening and potential solutions in a sort of 5 minute sort of slot, and I'll respond.
Yeah. So first of all, I need to clarify, this isn't a Labour problem. Everything I described then has been going on all my life, regardless of government.
Yeah, so interesting. Yeah.
All that's different now in the last 6 weeks is the blatant authoritarian streak we're seeing.
Right.
Now, all governments are authoritarian. We've seen all the laws they've passed. We've seen what they do. We've seen them penalise people. Even the Tories, everybody's been doing it. What we've seen different is this blatant authoritarian streak coming out of this 6-week-old Labour government.
Yeah.
That's been the surprise for me.
Yeah.
Them increasing taxes and spending more money. You'd be a fool if you thought they weren't going to do anything like that.
Yeah.
That was guaranteed.
Mm.
Starmer is obviously. So a lot of this is conjecture on my part because I don't know Starmer, never met the man. So I'm not saying any of this is gospel. This is just my opinion of what I've seen.
Yeah.
I think Starmer is a weak man. He's a bureaucrat.
Yeah.
He likes, I worked in the council for 10 years. He's worked in public services all his life. He's one of those people who likes to follow procedure. He likes methodology because he knows where he stands in that. He knows I do A, you do B, we get C.
Yeah.
And if you work with people face to face, you realize we have no idea what people are going to do.
Yeah.
We may think we know that they want this service, they want this project, they want our help, but we have no idea what a person wants until we speak to them and we ask them. And even then, their answer is usually not the truth anyway, because most people tell you what they think you want to hear in some sort of way. So people are very complicated.
Yeah.
He has an ideology. He's been heavily influenced by Marxist ideology and the far left, and he's been and still is a member of groups like that. So I believe, and I've read people I trust online and newspapers. So he has an agenda, but that was an agenda we knew anyway. The violence on the streets threw him. The riots, and I don't condone the riots. I condone the protests. I condone people going on the streets. I support people going on the streets to say we're sick of this.
Yeah.
We're sick of foreigners killing us. We're sick of mass immigration. I support all that. But at this moment in time, violence isn't the answer, and won't be for decades. He's shocked because he got into power. He knows he has no money. He knows he's only elected by a fluke because the Tories were despised. So he got a majority on such a thin margin of the vote. He knows it's paper thin because he's not a stupid man. So politicians are not stupid. They know, they understand.
Yeah.
He saw the violence, and like most politicians, it scared him. He went, oh, how do we control violence? We've only got a thin blue line of the police, and we all know the police now are basically incompetent. Lots of police officers are not fit enough to do the job. We've got 3.5-foot women trying to control 8-foot men. That doesn't work. We've got obese officers. We've got mentally ill officers. We've got sex offending officers. The police force is ready to collapse. Public trust, it's gone. He's scared. He's looked at that violence and went, I need to get a grip on this ASAP. Hence why he's not addressed the underlying issues, because he's scared of his base rejecting him if he starts talking about mass immigration. So he's stuck between two rocks here, and he's done what all weak leaders do. And what weak leaders do is they only have two weapons. They have lies and they have force. Lies don't work anymore now. Propaganda doesn't work because of things like this podcast, because of independent TV radio stations, because of online, because of X. But propaganda doesn't work, so he's had to resort to brutality. And that's what all scared politicians, dictators, emperors, and kings always end up doing. It's the only way to control the people. But there's a great quote, or there's a great scene in Star Wars where Princess Leia is talking to Darth Vader's boss. I forgot his name, General Akin or something. And Darth Vader stood next to him, and she says to him, and she's talking about the Empire. She says, the more you tighten your grip, the more star systems will slip through your fingers. And that's the phase we're going through now. I welcome the brutality at the moment because A, it shows us they're scared, they're afraid, also shows us they're failing. And the more brutality they inflict upon us, the more star systems will slip through their fingers and join the rebellion, and eventually this government will fall.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you. I think your background's very different to mine. I mean, I've spent most of my career in the public sector, also in the private sector. and I've noticed these traits in company turnaround situations, and I've watched this over the years, and I've watched it escalate. So, um, and am I right in thinking that most of your experience has been in the public sector? Is that fair, Nick? Or
No, it's split. So the first 15 years of my life self-employed,
okay,
next 10 years working for a council,
yeah,
and then the next 15 years working for a charity,
yeah,
and the last few years back to self-employed.
yeah. No, that's really interesting. I think um, so. I think when you say that it's not a left thing, I think the civil service have got a lot to do with this because when I look at, I try to understand the background, what's driving this stuff psychologically, and there's been a big shift in terms of the left-leaning people in the civil service.
Mm,
And it's shifted. It used to be about 50-50 about 20 years ago. It's now about 90-10, which is an interesting change. And when you look at what Dominic Cummings, who is an interesting character,
mm,
and he doesn't take any prisoners, and what he says is that you almost need to create a parallel organization and transfer the good people from one place to another. It's so bad. And I've done that in company turnaround situations where the culture is so shot, you actually need to just take people out and drop them in something different and get the
mm,
thing working and push out all of the ideology. I mean, I think my observations of this is ideology always is based upon lies, or at best, part truths, which are
mm,
almost worse. And the problem with ideology is if people believe it, and Starmer absolutely believes his ideology around immigration, and you can see this in a very non-thinking way. Even the way he reads his speeches, he's looking down, he's not thinking. Whereas Farage, like him or not, he will talk off the topic like you do, Nick, very naturally. You're thinking what you're saying. Whereas Starmer is not thinking, so and he's driven by ideology
mm,
largely. So when he gets challenged, he switches like an infant, to immediate attack,
mm,
labeling people far right and racist. And I think what you just said in terms of the response, authoritarian response, is exactly the opposite of what I do in a company turnaround situation, which is to establish accountability and responsibility with those people who are generally the least likely people to be able to take it, to actually navigate and take action to get out of the situation. So I think and actually when you talk about the police, I've just been to France and they've got a CRS. Have you seen the CRS riot police in France?
yeah.
They're really formidable and they're like, solid. They've got guns, they're fit, 6'2". You wouldn't mess with them. And I think there's a real issue with the courage. There's a real issue actually. You talked about not taking responsibility and victimhood and not taking action. You talked about a bill, not opening the bill, not facing the truth. The reality of that, I think, is it accelerates weakness because the only thing that develops our strength or our grit is facing the truth and taking action, which we all need to do individually to create something that's useful. So I think the other side of this, I think, as well, there's a spiritual side of this, which it's my personal view, but I think Christianity has been the bedrock of the UK. And what I mean by this is followers of Jesus as opposed to the Church of England, because the Church of England, interesting enough, has got corrupted by a lot of this stuff as well. And I think there's what's very obvious is that, and troubling is that this situation also shows how easy people are to manipulate and control with dialogue. And I think the best example of that is Kamala Harris, which is and interesting enough, they're both prosecutors, if you notice that, which is pretty disturbing. But Kamala Harris, if you ask her supporters, why do they want to support Kamala Harris? They have no idea. But they have no reason, but they are almost kept in this bubble. And I've talked about this a few in my books, and you've talked about it in your own way around what I described initially as the evil of silence, the ability to shut people down. You've then got the equity, diversion, inclusion type ideology, which starts bending people out of shape and creating weird dynamics and generally messing up the good people in organizations and making organizations almost impossible for people like you and I to work in.
Mm,
The third part is why can't we stop? Technology's got a lot to do with this. And then there's COVID vaccines, I think, have got quite a bit to do with this as well, which I've sort of captured. But along this journey, I think there's been a real um, a real shift to, you know, to a place of mass psychosis, which is not totally foreign to what caused the burning of the witches, which was an idea that was unchallenged and it was maintained and it led to violence, which is unfortunately what this leads to. Because if you believe lies, Nick, or if you believe anything, because my concern as a Christian is that there's a danger that we believe anything. If you don't have somewhere where you get things from, which sort of makes sense, you believe anything. So how do you resolve things, between people if there isn't that common denominator? And I think you know, there's a common bit of ideology around destroying nations as well. So very intentional immigration. I look at the psychology of this. It's about destroying nations. It's about destroying national identity. Now, EDI is about creating conflict. Purely, it used to be around. It's Marxism. It used to be around who's got money, who hasn't. It's now about far more divisive, and it's about conflict. So when you look at the psychology of these things, you just got to stop doing these things because they're known to destroy. So I think the outcome of this is if you have ideology, be it Islamic ideology, be it far left ideology, and it's not based upon truth, all you can do is what Starmer did, which is fragilely respond with violence or locking people up, which is pretty close to violence.
Mm.
And that actually is contagious. So when you look at the judiciary, what they're saying, which is weirdly publicized, which actually is the third part, because in the tyranny, be it Hitler, be it Mao, they always use the same thing: persecution of the Jews, the victim, the scapegoating, no, far right, blah blah blah. The victim is whoever they are. The scapegoating is far right, which raises the bar, and that escalates. And then you've got the terror, and the terror element in this situation is this videoing of these poor suspects who've posted something unfortunate on Facebook. And I think my concern with this is that who gets angry? I mean, you and I, you know, care about this, and actually people who care are likely to get angry, naturally angry, and act out of character. And I've seen this a lot in organizations, and you know, I've always recognized that actually if someone is getting angry and upset, great to a degree because they care. Now
Yeah.
let's find out what they care about and how do we harness their energy more productively, let's say. But to lock them up, um, and these are soldiers who fought for the country, you name it. No, they're not bad people. And so, I think my concern with this is how do we actually get to grips with this? How do we prevent people being held in the Kamala bubble, where people are being fed with ideology devoid of truth? And actually, the interesting thing is, it's so extreme in the Kamala instance that she's actually been taken off. I don't know if you noticed that she never says anything because she's such a liability,
Mm.
and to a degree, Starmer is as well. When I listen to Starmer, the psychology of the guy is really disturbing, and Biden was the same. He instantly moves to blame and no solution. Exactly what you know, and I common link about taking personal responsibility. So I think you know, in these situations, you've got to ask the question: who is, if there are good people like you and I, right, and how effective are we at actually making a difference to this versus who's actually thriving in this situation? That's what concerns me. And how do we turn that tide?
Mm.
Um, and I do attempt to, if you look at my interactions, I intentionally sort of stick my head in the lion's mouth from time to time. But you get a common response where, tragically, you hit a but. If you challenge something around immigration, whatever it might be, whatever the subject is, you instantly are talking to someone, not the person but the ideology, and you've got immediately got conflict, and you then get this chain of events which is um denying the facts, not in the slightest bit interested in what you're saying, taking no interest, no grace, and just systematically aggressively attacking the individual rather than the issue. And aggressive, I think, is interesting. I don't talk about this much for a while, but aggressive is when you go for the individual rather and assertive is when you go for the issue. And you get involved in this attack from their side. and it's completely devoid of thinking. And you know, it's difficult to know actually if you've got. And actually, the other thing I've noticed, actually, Nick, which is vaguely interesting, is that people, if you look at the population, roughly 50% of the population are like you and I, sort of proactive action makers of some sort of variety. You know, you take a lead brilliantly in terms of being courageous enough to stick your neck out on the political scene, saying, look, being mayor or whatever, it's fantastic. And on the other side, so 50% of those sorts of proactive doing type people, and 50% are people who tend towards victimhood. And I think probably the last thing I'd say about this is the the difficulty is if the issues are getting increasingly difficult to talk about, let alone resolve, right? And people are losing their ability to have difficult conversations, then the temptation is, right, for those people on the right like you and I to actually fall into victimhood ourselves, to actually talk our way into it. And or we have to be careful. I'm very conscious of this, and I think you probably would be as well, in terms of your personal discipline, not to take small steps, to corrupt yourself, frankly, because you and I have both seen the consequences of that in our own way, I think. And I've seen it in, absolute fraud happening in companies. I talk about this quite a lot in my business. I take cash from time to time, but I religiously put it through my business. I know very well if I don't, I will be, it's those small steps, and I've seen it happen in organizations. And the same thing goes in terms of, Khan's attempt to normalize the anti-British ideology he's got by running these Pakistan days, and getting the police to jump all over, around and dance with the protesters. And this is all about an attempt to normalize things, which is sort of anti-establishment, which I think is dangerous territory. So, I think, and then I think there is an element as well of, which my the last part of one of my books is about, which is about the influence of the World Economic Forum, and actually these strategies are absolutely aligned with the World Economic Forum. So what did Starmer said immediately? We need facial recognition before he even talked about what the issue was.
Mm.
And these are intentional destructive strategies, in my analysis, psychologically, to allow, in escalating crises to impose, more and more tyrannical solutions to problems that that don't exist. So I think they're in the background. And Starmer, if you listen, important to listen to what people say. Starmer said that he'd prefer to spend more time with the WF than Parliament.
Yeah.
And Gates, I've done a lot of work on the vaccine, oddly enough, and the background to that. Gates' statement about the vaccine being related to population reduction. Very important to listen to the psychology. And where's the common link? So I've looked at this from the perspective of where's the common link with the psychology, almost regardless of the facts, because what's driving this, and when you look at what's driving this, it's not good. So let's just acknowledge that. And so I think, yeah. So quite a lot to think about there, maybe.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that, or?
Yeah, there's a lot there to unpick. First thing I'll say is we always forget we're tribal creatures.
Yeah.
That's at the heart of much of this.
Yeah.
So when times are good, our tribal instincts reduce because we have plenty of resources, there's no threats.
Yeah.
Let's all get along, let's all sing Kumbaya because everything's fine.
Yeah.
The second we hit tough times, which we're in now,
yeah,
people automatically go back to tribalism because they want to protect resources for them, their family, their community, and for people who they perceive to be like them.
Yeah.
And then at that stage, then we see other people as others.
Yeah.
They're not like us. We would rather have them die or suffer than me die or me suffer.
Yeah.
And that's why everybody is splitting into tribes. That's why America is split 50-50. That's why we have woke people and right-wing people. That's why we have different communities, the Pakistani community, the Bangladeshi community, the white British, because everyone is splitting back into tribes because that's what we've been designed to do when we hit tough times. It's how we survive.
Yeah.
And then with the psychosis you've talked about, for me, a lot of that is if you can give people a very simple explanation to very complicated issues,
Mm,
well, that sounds fantastic.
mm.
You know, the reason why our country, that's, Germany in the 1930s, the reason why we're failing, we haven't got much money, is Jews.
Yeah,
Oh, is it Jews? Is it? Oh, right, great.
yeah, yeah,
Like now, the reason why um, black or brown people are not, in certain organizations at the same percentage they are in the population is down to unconscious bias. Oh,
yeah,
well, that makes sense. Fantastic. There's the answer to that.
yeah,
So we're always looking for simple answers.
yeah,
And then we also need to realize that tribes are not made up of leaders. You have one or two leaders in a tribe and the rest are followers. And you might
mm,
have one or two people who are potential leaders or will challenge a narrative. But you can't have a tribe full of leaders. You can't have a tribe full of followers. You can't have a
mm.
tribe full of people who will push back all the time, because those tribes throughout history have then been destroyed.
Yeah,
So we've been designed to follow the tribal leader and take on board and take at face value what we're told. Tribal leaders these days are our politicians, our religious leaders, our community leaders, whoever we think they are.
yeah,
Um, the solution to all these problems for me, and I don't think I'm right, because how do I know I'm right? I don't know if you're right either,
mm,
because it's not for me to judge if we're right. I just think I'm right.
mm.
I'm trying to seek knowledge so I can be a better person.
Yeah,
What my aim is, what my real aim is to make people think.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Because if we can get people thinking, well, they will reject ideology. They will reject the poor ideas.
yeah,
They may reject what I'm saying because it turns out I'm full of it.
yeah,
But I would rather them come to that conclusion by thinking
yeah,
rather than presuming or being told this is the case. So if we're going to get through this, and we will get through it to a certain extent, but we're not going to change the human race. The human race is the human race. It takes millennia, thousands of years to change animals, and that's what we are. And then your last point was a WEF and globalism and those sort of things. Now, if we give these people the benefit of the doubt and we say they really are looking out for mankind and they really want the best for mankind, and I'm sure they think they do.
yeah,
So let's take that as face value. What I think they're doing is they're looking ahead. So everybody thinks war is wrong. Do you agree?
absolutely. Yeah,
We all think that people dying, civilians dying in war is horrendous. We need to stop it. Well, how can we stop war? Well, we stop war by getting rid of countries. If the world can become one country with one government, and we're treating all different parts of the world the same and making sure every part of the world has the same opportunities and the same standard of living, that will that will hopefully end conflict across the world,
mm,
and then we'll have peace on this planet. That's their idea. To get to that, they're going to have to become world tyrants to
yeah,
get
absolutely.
to that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Now, the world over the next 500,000 years might get to that stage, but it'll be a very long, slow process. These people want to do it in a generation of two. And to achieve that, they've got to become something so much worse than Hitler, Stalin, Mao. And I'm talking by a magnitude of 100.
mm,
They're going to have to become something like that to achieve what they're trying to achieve. It is fairy tale. It's a dream. It's a dream of a fool. Now, these people are all very clever in certain fields. Doesn't mean they're not fools. Many fools have degrees and have doctorates,
mm.
and these are just dangerous fools.
Yeah, yeah. The analogy that I use in terms of sort of what does good look like, and the analogy I use is, and what I found is what determines people's well-being is healthy conversations and relationships like this conversation, Nick, we're having now, um, where there's a healthy interest in what other people are saying, which is, and acceptance that it may not be what you think, or and actually then there's dialogue and there's you come away from it feeling like you've had a healthy challenge yourself, you've learned something, as well as you know, you know, developed no relationship. I think with talk. I mean, I think you talked a bit about the police and sort of sectarianism. I think sectarianism is ideology because the ideologies around, you bring people into this country, they maintain their own values, you destroy the national identity, and everybody's going to be happy because they're doing their own thing. And then you've
Mm,
got community policing, which is policing by consent. Now,
mm,
if you look at policing by consent and the values in an Islamic versus a traditional Christian community, it's soil and water.
mm,
Um, and actually, that obviously creates a divide, and it's the antithesis of having relationship and common values. And I think the other thing I think is, we've got to have what's happened is we did have hard values in this country around, you know, uh, fair policing, common, truth, innocent till proven guilty, all these sort of basic things, um, and um, and also sort of sexual normality, and not encouraging sexual deviancy. And actually, what's happened, I think, is those basic truths which should hold and define the national identity have been whittled away. Policing's been chipped away, sexual. Look at the thing with the Olympics, whatever the
mm,
opening ceremony was all about, whatever that was all about. We this is all being chipped away, gender ideology, another truth being chipped away. And so I think it's very important to hold on to these values. And actually, the interesting thing is actually there's a lot of commonality between Islam and Christianity,
mm,
and it's called the Old Testament. And actually, the same with the Jews. So, uh, there's a lot of commonality, and actually, national identity should be, in my view, should sort of hold the thing together, and we should value it. You know, but I think ideology. You talked about negative generalizations and or thinking. Ideology is really very problematic because and actually fueling ideology. And what I guess what concerns me is one, the awareness of because you're right, people do think they're doing the right thing, Nick.
mm.
You and I think we're doing the right thing. Klaus Schwab does. So do so does Starmer. Um,
So did Hitler, and
yeah,
so did
absolutely.
Stalin.
Yeah, and it
These
all gets a
these
bit.
people didn't consider themselves evil. They thought they were doing the best for their country and their people.
Exactly. But I think the traits of not taking personal responsibility, not having personal freedom to speak up, uh, and the antithesis, which is victimhood, scapegoating, and terror, which is what happens and it's what we've witnessed, that leads to extreme violence.
Mm,
Um, and so, and actually, when you consider that the fuel on this fire, which is controlled narrative, right? So if you speak up against various things, um, what that does is it potentially suppresses the good people and emboldens the real thugs who will attack people in prisons that have been labelled far right or EDL. And the EDL was dead for 10 years.
mm.
Just absurd accusations. So we've got a prime minister who's fueling this
Yeah.
himself. And so that, and actually the problem with that, I mean, it's like a leader, like him or like him not, they have a unique privilege that, and I find this in the company turnaround situation. People look to me, for leadership, and actually I have to be very, very careful what I do because people will do what I say, Nick.
Mm,
Right. So I have to walk into this with a degree of humility and sort of, couch some of the things I'm saying to get people on board to make sure I'm not the next authoritarian. And
mm,
actually, I all I do is I give people accountability, broadly decide what needs to happen, and give them the opportunity to do it,
mm,
which is all about accountability and responsibility, which is the absolute antithesis of what you rightly pointed out, which
mm,
is this tyranny which we're slipping into. And non-thinking is very dangerous. And I think there's you know, I think we ought to coalesce around this problem and try to find a cohort maybe of people who can broaden this and really influence to make sure that we don't just sort of assume it's going to get better. because I think there's a learning there's a few learning points here that need to be shared. So just in a nutshell, Nick, what do you put your hope in this situation in a few words? What is it that you find hope in this situation?
Well, that's easy. They're called the English people.
Yeah,
We've been in worse situations before. Even in my lifetime, the 70s were worse than this.
interesting.
I lived through the 70s. I remember days on end with no power. I remember my house being lit by candles.
Yeah,
I remember my mum could only find potatoes to buy that were like size of golf balls.
yeah,
These were my childhood memories. With bodies not being buried, piles of rubbish on the streets, strikes everywhere, being the sick man of Europe. It was worse in the 70s. It was different,
yeah,
but it was worse than this. And and then we look beyond that. We had Hitler and Napoleon ready to invade this island,
yeah,
and we managed to defeat them eventually. We
yeah,
had the Spanish Armada where we got a bit of luck because of the weather, which destroyed the Armada.
yeah,
Um, we've been through worse times, and we always come through because the English people genetically, island race, were formidable.
yeah,
We had the biggest empire the world has ever seen. We've
yeah,
created the modern world.
yeah,
Most of the inventions, the Enlightenment, all came from this island.
yeah,
So I don't worry that we're going to fail. I just worry how long it's going to take, and I'm trying to speed it up because it will happen. The people are beginning to wake up now, and the people are beginning to wake up and say, I don't like what I see. I was promised a utopia. I was promised we'd be richer if we allowed immigrants in the country. I was told there'd be less crime if we treated criminals like victims, pink and fluffy. And everything we've been told has turned out to be false.
yeah,
And not only am I more unhappy, more in danger, poorer, less opportunities, our children can't afford to buy houses, education's collapsing, the NHS, and yet they're still telling me that they're doing a good job and they want more money off my pay packet.
yeah,
People are waking up, and that's why we're getting people on the streets. And
yeah,
every incident that happens now, people will be on the streets. Labour are going to get a real beating at the local elections in May next year. That'll be the first litmus test of this government.
yeah,
Um, and then they won't last 5 years. We've got years of this to come, but it won't last 5 years.
yeah,
The next government, the next general election will be on all these problems,
yeah.
and the government we elect will not be the solution.
No,
If they make things slightly better, if we're lucky, it will be the election after that. I think we won't see big change for at least 10 years. Um, and then we will see what that changes. Is it Reform UK? Is it people we've not heard of yet? Who will the Tories elect? Because all the candidates for the Tory leadership at the moment have all tainted in my eyes.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
none of them are prime minister material.
no,
They were all in government for 14 years
yeah,
at some point and managed decline. So I just know the English people, especially the English people, will not put up with this, and
no,
change is coming.
yeah, no, I agree. I mean, if you look, there's a couple of interesting sort of, if you look at any revolution, it's always started by a very, very small percentage of the population. Even major, what destroyed Russia, what destroyed every nation, or the French Revolution, it always started with 1 or 2% of the population creating problems. I think in this, what I'd play devil's advocate a little bit because if, let's say, there is some nefarious influence, which I do believe there are nefarious influences, otherwise we wouldn't be talking about immigration. For the very reasons you've just described, if they can take down, right, the UK for all the reasons, because we are a nation of fighters, we are real warlords,
Mm.
and actually we get what happens, I think, in the UK is people are pretty tolerant, pretty graceful, but then, right, they say that enough is enough, and then things change, and there's no way that the UK population will be suppressed. They'll just get to that point, and it'll be curtains, and it'll probably be curtains for the Labour Party when that happens, where there's significant uprising. If people find the strength to speak up, so but thank you, Nick. That's a really positive outlook. And let's continue the dialogue. Let's fortify each other. Let's coalesce. I think coalesce is a really important word.
Mm.
Um, we are highly reliant on other people to challenge your ideas. You've challenged my ideas today, so thank you. Um, and that's what Jesus said: bring things into the light. Like him or like him not. It's very true. It's silencing actually fosters evil. Bringing things into the light is the way things get sorted.
Daylight is a great disinfectant of poor ideas.
Exactly.
Once you shine a light on an idea, you soon find out if it's a good idea or a bad idea.
Yeah. So I think on that note, and actually humor as well really matters as well. So
Yeah,
if you can get somebody else who vehement, and I do this quite a lot, if you get someone else who vehemently disagrees with you to laugh, then what that does psychologically, it takes away all the assumptions for that window while you're laughing and that period while you're still sort of your jaws
yeah,
wobbling a bit, whatever, and then you can have a conversation. So
yeah. And
um,
not also authoritarians don't like to be mocked.
no, exactly. No, absolutely. So yeah, it's important you don't you're not taking the Michael, but if you can get people to laugh, that's great. Nick, it's my pleasure to see you, my friend. God
No,
bless
and
you.
you. No,
Yeah,
thank you, and let's chat again soon.
indeed. Take care. Cheers. Bye.